Hi, I'm Brad with a $8,000 outdated trash headset. Okay, obviously it's not trash, but it is technically outdated if you were to ask the company who made this thing, Vario. They've always been the pioneers of creating human resolution HMDs, primarily for the enterprise markets. And this week, they announced the successor to this, which is the XR3, known as the XR4. Luckily for me, they did an event that is literally in my hometown. A weird military simulation focused event, I would call it. And while it had some really fun toys that made me question all my ethical choices in life, they also had the brand new headset that I got to try out and give my opinions because guess what? You might not have known this, but I've had this in my room for the past few months and never wanted to do a video on it. So while I will give my impressions of that demo of the newest headset, I do want to give a little bit of context as to what the big jump from XR3 to XR4 is and why I think it's probably all the right choices that that company had to make. So I had the device for 3 months, as I said, and the main reason is Vario offered me the opportunity to basically loan it out to me for free, and I would send it back. I eventually will, and I never could make a video about it, despite the fact that I did a lot of cool experiments and tweet videos, short stuff, showing off some experiments I did with VR chat, mostly doing AR mixed reality stuff in the headset because that was kind of the defining feature for me, honestly. It has those amazing human resolution displays, and they do that by, in that older headset, by having a tiny micro OLED display that would be just extremely human resolution in that little area in your view. But they would also have a second display per eye that would fill out your periphery, and it would also be a pretty high resolution display. But basically, meshing those two displays not only added complexity to the optics and obviously the software, but it added a ton of weight to the HMD. And I never felt the Vario XR3 was a comfortable headset, even though it was an amazing experience when it came out. And I started to get worried for Vario a little bit, especially when Apple announced their headset. And obviously, Apple is trying to target the consumer, or at least prosumer market. They're not really going after enterprise only like Vario has for the past long time. But they definitely offer a package that I can see enterprise being able to take that hardware and sort of meld it together into their plans. Especially when I kept looking at the XR3 and looking at the Apple headsets hardware, I'm like, there are some changes that Vario needs to make quickly. And it happened. As I said, the XR4 was announced this week, and it had some changes I thought were very necessary and expected for them to make, but also some changes I didn't really think that they would stick with. Obviously, while they don't have the extreme supply chain power like Apple does, I do want to talk about some of those changes in my experience. Now, it's important to note these industry events are usually like magic shows. They are extremely controlled environments from the company's booth that you're at. So they usually make software demos that perfectly show off all the best sides of a hardware and usually do also perfectly hiding some of the negative sides of the hardware. So whenever I do a trade show and you see a video of me trying something out in a short period of time from a trade show, it's always important that you keep that in mind, okay? I don't have the headset here. I can't do a lot of my regular long-term testing. So yeah, always keep that in mind when I go to like CES or anything. So first of all, my biggest worry when I saw the device compared to, well, let's say the Apple device, for example, probably the biggest competitor in some ways, it looked giant. It still looked like a very bulky HMD. And one of the reasons I didn't want to use my XR3 for a long period of time, even though I'm not enterprise, I'm a consumer, and they gave that option for me to do, was I thought the thing was so front heavy that it just never was fun for me to use, despite all of the amazement that comes from it. So when I saw they did not use pancake lenses, I was pretty disappointed. And I thought this whole thing looks very large and very giant. I know they're targeting enterprise, but that's unfortunate. However, when I got to the booth and I put the headset on, and they did some changes compared to XR3 to the XR4, like the biggest change is the forehead pad. They changed that from a leather to a mesh pad, which also is a really good idea because leather usually makes you sweat a bit more, and you can actually feel the air blowing through that mesh padding on the top of your head. And that's not the main thing that they changed for comfort. Another thing is they added a counterweight built into the back of the headset. And I think this entire ergonomic design was a total win for them. This is definitely the most comfortable aspheric high-end headset I've ever tried. In previous aspheric-based designs like the Crystal or even the Vario Aero, I've always kind of felt those headsets were just too extremely front heavy and never really enjoyable for someone like me to use them. Because, yes, you're getting some of those amazing specs on paper, but if you cannot enjoy wearing the things, I think that's a loss for hardware at this point in the industry. But when I put it on, I immediately felt very similar to the comfort I got from the Valve Index, which has always been one of the most comfortable headsets for me outside of the box, which is great. I think the counterweight has a lot to do with that because, again, we're not pancake lenses here. So the actual components are not close to your face at all. And I think that's the one thing you actually do notice from the actual comfort is, yes, they're using aspheric lenses, and yes, you do feel that sort of jiggling around when you move your head, but it's still very evenly distributed and a very good design. So I think whoever designed the head strap for this company did a fantastic job with what they had to do. Some other big things that other previous Vario headsets didn't have that always annoyed me with using them is they had no built-in mic or speakers, and they finally added both of those built-in things for the XR4. And I couldn't really judge how good the audio quality was at the event because it's a giant convention hall. There's tons of people talking to each other and stuff's going on. But it sounded pretty good based on that. And they were trying to show off the spatial audio. They had like a digital radio that you move your head around to see how good it was. And even though I couldn't discern it perfectly, having something built in like that for a $4,000 device seems like a necessary thing. So they added that. Now let's get into the thing I think people are most curious about always when it comes to a VR or AR headset on this channel, and that's the visuals. So first, again, they're not using pancake lenses, and due to that, they are able to get a high brightness, around 200 nits, which is around double the brightness of a Quest Pro, for example, and a little more than double the Index at its max brightness rating. So yeah, it does get pretty bright in bright environments, but it was not really something that I thought was too necessary for them to advertise as like a major feature. It was just a nice quality of life improvement and something they kind of are probably using as a marketing term to be like, you won't see that in many Pancake headsets because obviously Pancake's light efficiency is not very good. I measured 85 nits, for example, at 100% on the Quest 3 and around 100 nits at 100% on the Quest Pro. So probably marketing jargon. It's nice to have, but it's not like a blow your mind sort of thing. Now, they're using very large panels for this headset, and that's where a lot of the bulk, I think, comes from other than the aspheric design. The displays are actually around the same size of the displays in the Valve Index, around that 3.5-inch diagonal. Now, the difference is, obviously, the resolution is much more higher than the Valve Index, 4K by 4K per eye, which looked pretty freaking good. I mean, I cannot judge the resolution poorly in this headset. Well, obviously, I wish it was micro LED because even though it has the high color rating and the mini LED backlight that's supposed to give more contrast, I still notice it's an LCD panel, right? Like you can just tell that the colors and like sort of the contrast especially, it's just not really something as amazing as something in like my big screen Beyond, for example. But the resolution was very good. They showed up some a lot of high-end, a lot of beautiful environments for me to be able to judge the human eye resolution they're kind of advertising here. So this is still a very high resolution headset, even without that little, I would be fair to say, gimmicky middle display design from previous headsets. And it's even across your entire FOV. The edge-to-edge clarity on this headset is very good. I would almost compare it to the Pancake lenses in the Quest 3 or Quest Pro. Now, they're not perfect. I noticed on the very edges of the display, whereas even on the Quest 3, you do get like a little bit of blurring and stuff on the very edges. You get that, plus you also get some geometric distortion. I noticed that pupil swim that I see in a lot of aspheric-based headsets. Basically, when you move your head around or things shuffle a bit, it doesn't evenly it like warps a bit. Like the geometry and what you're seeing in the headset warps a bit. And while it's all the way in the far edge of the display, so it's again not a huge issue probably for most people, but it's something I did notice, and I personally hate pupil swim quite a bit. But it's, I think for simmers who don't really move their head very much, it's going to be a really good visual experience for them. Something I was surprised not to see, and again, this is a very controlled demo, is I couldn't notice any sort of chromatic aberration or that red shifting that you see in other, even Vario headsets. That's a really big problem. So that they probably nailed down perfectly. I don't know if they nailed it down for every demo, but at least in my demo, I could not notice anything. Really, the visuals were pretty freaking good, and I think the biggest thing that wowed me more than all the other stuff that I said here is the thing that they needed to improve the most from previous Vario headsets, and that is obviously the field of view. So the field of view in this headset, they had like sort of a demo where they would sort of block out the edges to simulate what the FOV in the XR3 was, and then they would turn off that vignetting to show what the FOV of the headset is now. And when they did that, I was like, yeah, that's a pretty noticeable improvement. Yeah, that's pretty nice. But I didn't know till the near end of my demo. I asked the guy, wait a minute, is the eye relief set all the way closest to me? And we checked, and that was the FOV when it was farthest away from me. And when I pushed it up to my eyes, I was like, okay, yeah, that is a really good field of view. And it's very even. It doesn't feel letterboxy at all. Very, very nice FOV for this headset, and you get that extremely high resolution across the entire FOV. So it's kind of in a league above something like the Quest 3, for example, which I already thought the visuals were pretty good, but this is obviously way better in terms of that sort of FOV and resolution and pixels per degree and stuff. Now, it's heavy still. Like, again, it is front heavy. When you move your head, it does shift around, but this is way better than previous Vario products that I've tried, and a lot easier to use in general, because again, even though it's a PCVR focused headset, and I think that's fine for a lot of enterprise customers, they also removed the requirement for using 2 DisplayPort and 2 USB-Cs. The previous Vario XR3 had 2 individual link boxes that you would plug into power, 2 DisplayPorts, and due to that, you wouldn't be able to use like multiple monitors on some of the setups that you use this headset with, which was incredibly annoying. They just use one USB-C 3.2 requirement of that USB standard and a DisplayPort 1.4, and that's again solves a lot of problems with sort of kind of breaking into that prosumer territory a bit easier with their high-end XR marketing, right? Another thing they were showing off was the fact that they are switching from only using Lighthouse tracking. You would require the base stations from Valve or HTC, for example, to do all the tracking in your headset, to a fully inside-out tracking system. And this was not the best environment for me to be able to try and test the actual tracking system and how accurate or good it is long-term. But I was able to at least try out their controllers, which they actually co-developed with Razer, the company that makes mice and terribly awful software with those mice. And it's very standard design. Like, it's kind of like the old, like the Quest 1 controllers. It's got the ring still for the IR LEDs. The biggest thing about it is it's kind of got like that knuckle strap that you can just wrap around your hands. Now, one thing I noticed about that strap that kind of made me worried about those controllers, not really a tracking quality, is that that little tightener for that strap felt quite a bit more loose than something I would get with the index controllers, where if I would start doing this with my hand, it would kind of loosen quite easily. So it kind of felt a bit more cheap than I would expect from a $4,000 kit, right? And also the ergonomics of those handles did not really feel good. They felt a bit too blocky and straight, whereas I feel like you would want a little more curves on something that you put your hands in for a long period of time to do whatever you're doing. So controllers are just eh. And then there was one more thing that was obviously the star of the show, and it's the pass-through, right? And I've always think with the XR3 even, the pass-through was very good, and stuff like being able to do occlusion with AR, being able to see your hand in front of Virtual Object was always really good on that headset. I was really sad that they didn't seem to have that going on during my demo, because they improved the accuracy and like how much their accuracy of their LiDAR system on the hardware to be able to do stuff like that, meshing even better. But that stuff is in there. But in terms of the quality of the pass-through and the imaging, even though this was not a very brightly lit hall, the pass-through was very, very good. Very nice to see. Very, very high resolution. Still wouldn't be something I would call human eye resolution pass-through, but I still think getting to there is still a big difficulty. And the latency for that pass-through, I think, could have been a little bit better. I think they're advertising 28 milliseconds, but they're going to improve it over time. And yeah, I do think it could be improved quite a bit compared to some other pass-through systems. But it looks very sharp. And the one note, most of you people who are interested and willing to spend $4,000, I didn't try that unit. There is one other version of the XR3 called the XR3 Focal Edition that I did try. And it's everything the same, except on top of the camera, the actual cameras, not the actual lenses you're looking at. This is not a varifocal headset, but the pass-through cameras on the Focal Edition, which is like $6,000 more or something extreme, they add a variable focus to the camera, so you can actually autofocus on things based on what you're looking at. And this does use kind of like the eye tracking, because Varjo headsets have always had very good eye tracking to be able to pinpoint where you're looking at, very fast, high refresh rate, was always good, and they kind of applied that to the camera pass-through as well. And something I would do, for example, is I would look at my hand up close. I'd be able to see how fast the actual autofocus would kind of get something up close, and then I would look far away in the actual exhibition hall at some signs, and I'll be able to see it actually change the focal point to that, which doesn't sound that impressive for like most camera users, right? If you use a smartphone, that's what you kind of expect. But this was the first time I saw that effect in a very good demo, at least, with pass-through. Now, my biggest complaint about it was the speed of the autofocus was very delayed, I would say. And talking to some of the software engineers, they told me that they could have boosted the performance that much higher, but because they're in like a huge demo by demo by demo processing at this convention hall, they wanted to make the reliability higher. So they were scared that basically if they push that performance and that sort of delay a bit better, then the headset might have crashed or the pass-through would have crashed, and that would have been really annoying because they would have to delay some demos for that entire day, which they were fully booked that day. But it was still really cool to see a lot of that stuff in action, and all in all, it was a really cool headset to try out. So this leads to the question: at the current state, would I buy this headset when it's available to consumers? Because they do plan to basically allow people that are not, companies or require a tax ID to purchase it at some point. Not yet, but soon-ish. As someone who's buying an Apple Vision Pro because I value hardware, I think there is a huge benefit to paying a lot of money for hardware in this current state of technology. I'm close, but I'm not there yet because my demo was just too basic and I can't really decide based on that. I think what they have here is the best Varjo headset by far. I think it is way more usable long term than all the other headsets they've made, especially even for enterprise. I think the comfort improvements and the ease of use, especially for enterprise, not having to like set up base stations everywhere, I get why that's valuable for them. But the package is just way better. The built-in audio, built-in speakers and everything, I'm very close. I just want to see a little bit more of it before I delve into it. And the biggest barrier for me is kind of just the weight still. I think as a consumer, I'm very hesitant to spend that kind of money for even aspheric designs. I think even though they got the counter rate perfectly and it's very comfortable based on the weight of that, you still do feel that kind of shaking around. I'm very sensitive to that these days compared to like using a big screen Beyond where that's like alleviated completely. And even in the Quest 3, for example, when I have a counterweight on that headset, all the components are closer to my face, it feels nicer to move my head. So I think it's a total win for the enterprise community that they're targeting, but for consumers, I'm going to wait and see a little bit before I decide if I'm interested in it, because it's got a lot of nice features. But yeah. All right. that is my video. I hope it was educational and enjoyable and everything else. If you want to support me, please go to bradsmells.com/Patreon, and I will accept your money and eat it. Eat it. To do more content like this. Bye.